I didn't plan to make this video. I was just looking through some new finds. Nothing special at first glance. Caves, figurines, strange tools as usual. But the more I looked into it, the more I felt that these things didn't fit into the usual story. Somewhere the sizes are wrong. Somewhere the material is too well preserved. Somewhere it's not clear at all why they did it. And the more such details, the more interesting the overall picture becomes. I collected them in one episode to calmly show what we know about the past and what still remains unclear. Hi friend, you're on the KirTop channel. Monster burrows. There are thousands of tunnels in South America. Some are as narrow as animal burrows. Others are like the corridors of a military base, 4 meters wide and hundreds of meters long. Who dug them? Water and lava are out of the question. Geologists unanimously say, not nature. There are furrows on the walls as if from claws. In one of these caves in Argentina, they found the answer: the skeletons of 2 giant sloths. They weighed 4 tons each. Their claws were up to 20 centimeters long. That's what they needed tunnels of this size for. It is believed that they dug burrows for generations to raise their offspring and hide from the glacial climate. And narrower passages could belong to other monsters, ancient giant armadillos. Their modern descendants also dig, but on a smaller scale. And here the question arises, what else lies beneath our feet if such tunnels could be dug not by people, but by animals? A sword for the immortals. This is not just a weapon. This is a sword created at the turn of the eras, when China was split into dozens of warring kingdoms. But someone in the midst of this cruel reality made something else. Not for battles, not for victories, but as if for a ritual. The blade is bronze, but with a turquoise tint, as if the metal had absorbed the color of the sky. The handle is carved from rock crystal, transparent as ice. It is inlaid with gold details and turquoise inserts. Geometry, ornamentation, decoration. Everything is so thought out that it becomes clear. The sword was not created for a soldier's hand. It was created for something higher. The Warring States period is the 5th to 3rd centuries BC, a time of constant war, betrayals, and great reforms. But this sword is out of context. It speaks of a ritual. It could have been used in sacrifices, in rites of passage, or as a symbol of power that needed to be proven, not held. It is these artifacts that are confusing, because they do not fit our idea of the ancient world. We expect crude blades and battle scars. Instead, we get crystal, gold, and metal carved like jewelry. Deserted castle. In the middle of the dunes in the Algerian desert, there is a ruin. Lonely, without roads, without a name. Tourists do not get here. There are almost no satellite images. The place is called Sar, but this is unofficial. Sar in Berber means palace or castle, and Dra is the name of the river that once flowed nearby. No one knows who built this castle. No exact dating, no remains of a settlement around, only stone outlines against the sand. It seems as if the structure was cut out of time and simply forgotten. It is amazing that even in the era of geolocation, drones, and expeditions, there are places that almost no one has heard of. And perhaps it is these ruins that are most important because they do not fit into the usual picture. Stone tomb. In the north of Morocco, where the Tangier Peninsula looks out onto Gibraltar, archaeologists have found not just a cemetery, but an entire ritual map. 3 ancient necropolises, burials in stone boxes, standing stones, geometric signs, and caves with wall paintings. All this in a region that archaeologists have rarely talked about before. One of the tombs was dated precisely to 2000 BC. This is a site, a rectangular niche carved into the stone with slabs on top. It was not an easy job. It took a lot of time and effort, and all for the sake of burying the body in a strictly defined shape. But why? On the walls nearby are bitriangles, patterns of 8 triangles superimposed on each other. Sometimes they are interpreted as female figures or symbols of goddesses. There are also circles with dots, waves, squares with lines. All this resembles a picture encrypted in stone, but we do not yet understand the language of this picture. There are standing stones around, some taller than a person. They could serve as both borders and places of power. Perhaps it was here that ancient people gathered to bury, pray, celebrate something. All this thousands of years ago. Skulls with nails. In the southeast of Spain, among the ruins of ancient settlements, archaeologists have found something that immediately evokes an alarming feeling. 7 severed heads. Some have huge metal nails driven into them, not all the way through, but with obvious force, as if the skulls had been nailed to something. But why? At first they thought trophies of war, like the heads of enemies, displayed to intimidate. But a chemical analysis of the bones gave an unexpected result. Not all the skulls were foreign. In one city, 3 out of 4 heads belonged to people who came from afar, and in another, almost all were local. And this changes everything, because in one place, strangers were apparently executed and put on display, and in another, their ancestors were kept as relics. The heads were found near houses, inside dwellings. So this is no longer a demonstration of force, it is memory and respect. The Greeks wrote that the Gauls kept the heads of their enemies in boxes, and that Spanish mercenaries carried them on spears. But in reality, everything was more complicated. Forgotten civilization. On one of the plateaus in western India, far from cities and tourist routes, archaeologists have discovered petroglyphs that, according to preliminary estimates, are more than 12,000 years old. They are carved directly into the stone surface. The figures are strange, as if stylized people with elongated bodies, heads, and arms that are more reminiscent of something else. Some of the images evoke direct parallels with the mythology of Sumer and the Indus civilization. A similar image is found on seals found in Mesopotamia. There it is interpreted as a celestial being, a mediator between the worlds. And here is the same silhouette. Suddenly, on the Indian plateau, thousands of kilometers away. Scientists are cautious in their assessments. They talk about the coincidence of forms. They say that we cannot yet talk about a single culture. But there is another point of view. Perhaps these images are the last trace of a civilization that we know nothing about at all, which lived long before writing, before the Vedas, before the Indus culture, and its traces remained only on stone. There are more questions than answers. Who carved them? What do they mean? Why are they so similar to images from other parts of the ancient world? And how did it happen that these signs were literally underfoot, but almost no one knew about them? A dam from the wrong time. On the Vinalopó River near the Spanish city of Elche, there is a stone dam that was long considered to be a construction from the Islamic period. It seemed typical, a powerful structure at the mouth, massive walls, traces of canals, everything fit into the usual chronology. But a new study based on the method of optically stimulated luminescence has completely changed the picture. It turned out that this structure is 1,000 years older than the supposed date and was built at the end of the 1st century BC, during the era of the Roman Empire. The dam, over 130 meters long and about 4 meters high, turned out to be not just a part of the landscape, but an element of the entire hydraulic system of the Roman colony of Ilici. It worked not only as a flow regulator, but was probably also used to irrigate the surrounding lands. This was not a separate structure, but part of a complex engineering network. Thoughtful, logical, practical. In this story, there are no cults, no inscriptions, no myths. Just calculation, geometry, and a clear understanding of the terrain. The dam was not built for beauty. It was not decorated with bas-reliefs and was not written into legends. It was built so that it would stand, so that it would let water flow where it was needed, so that it would serve the city. And it still works. More than 2,000 years have passed. Civilizations have changed, languages have disappeared, but the dam has remained in its place. The Guardian of Moho. In the highlands of Peru, in the Moho region, there is a stone statue. Not tall, outwardly simple, but nevertheless causing a strange feeling. At first glance, it is just a carved monolith in the Tiwanaku style. Clear lines, a static pose, hands folded on the stomach. But the longer you look, the more it seems that the figure is out of context, as if it did not come from this time, and not even from this continent. The statue is called Moho Huaca. Its base is made in the form of a cross, reminiscent of the Andean chacana, an ancient symbol where each side denotes a level of the world, upper, middle, lower. But in this case, the cross is twisted in a spiral, clockwise, which in itself is rare and perhaps indicates a ritual meaning lost over time. However, what attracts attention most of all is not the style or the symbolism, but the strange similarities. The pose of the statue, its hands lowered and folded on its stomach, its direct gaze, all of this unexpectedly echoes the images of the Moai from Easter Island. And even earlier, with the stone steles from Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. The same composition, the same gestures, the same restraint. Completely different cultures, separated by thousands of kilometers and centuries, but seemingly using the same language of form. Stoned room. High in the Andes, in the ancient complex of Chavan de Huantar, archaeologists stumbled upon a room they weren't supposed to find. It was completely closed, with no visible entrances, no windows, no doors, just a narrow opening, as if someone had deliberately hidden this space from prying eyes. Inside, there are 23 artifacts. All are related to the use of psychoactive substances. Some are thin, hollow bird bones, sharp, perfectly processed like pipes. Research has shown that they contain traces of tobacco and DMT, a substance found in ayahuasca. And here are the questions that arise. What was this small, dark room with inhalation pipes for? Why was it isolated? Why was it built in such a way that it would then be hidden forever? One of the authors of the study says, "This is not spontaneous shamanism. This is a ritual, strictly controlled, formalized, and perhaps it was not meant for everyone. Only the elite had access to these practices, perhaps the priests or the ruling castes, because hallucinations here are not just a journey inside oneself, they are a mechanism of power. A small room, 2 or 3 people, darkness, and a hallucinogen that changes the perception of reality. Such conditions could form contact with the gods, trance, visions, and if ordinary people believed that the priest really talked to spirits, then the priest could use this as a tool, both for control and for management. A figure without a face. In the Damjili cave in Azerbaijan, archaeologists have found a tiny sandstone figurine, just 5 centimeters long. The details are amazingly precise. Hairstyle, belt, clothing, but the face is missing. No gender, no expression, only a restrained pose and a sense of image. This find is about 9,000 years old. This is the first Mesolithic human figurine found in the South Caucasus, but its value is not in its primacy. It is in the fact that it exists. In a region where ceramics were not yet known, someone was already trying to carve a person. Scientists believe that the figurine belongs to the transitional era, when nomads became sedentary, and not just dwellings arose, but rituals, memory, symbol. The Neolithic did not come here immediately. It manifested itself through such things, quietly, slowly, imperceptibly. Africa in Israel. In the south of Israel, in the Negev desert, archaeologists have explored the Tel Malhada Hill, one of the places associated with the biblical city of Molada. Among the finds from the 6th century next to Christian burials, they discovered something unexpected: 5 hand-carved ebony figurines. The material is Saigon ebony, which grows only in southern India and Sri Lanka. This in itself is a mystery, but the faces are most surprising. The figurines depict male and female torsos with expressive features, wide cheekbones, flattened noses, and a high forehead. Researchers are sure that these images have African features. On their heads are massive headdresses with holes made in them, possibly to wear the figurines as pendants or amulets. The burials themselves are Christian. Glass vessels, bronze and stone jewelry, and alabaster objects lay nearby. And among all this, there are figurines that clearly come from another culture and another world. This is not just a trade item. This is an object that had meaning. Perhaps these were images of ancestors. Perhaps they were symbols of the homeland that were preserved even after conversion to a new faith. Byzantine Palestine was a crossroads. Caravans, ships, and traders came from Africa, Arabia, and India. These figurines could travel hundreds of miles, change hands dozens of times, and end up here, in the sand, among the gravestones. For archaeologists, this is a rare find. It shows how deeply and complexly cultures mixed. Gods from the underground. In ancient Nineveh, the capital of the Assyrian Empire, archaeologists have unearthed a monumental relief. It was hidden in the ground right opposite the entrance to the throne room of the northern palace. The slab is almost 6 meters long and 3 meters high. It weighs about 12 tons. The image on it is striking in its detail. In the center of the relief stands King Ashurbanipal. On either side of him are the 2 main deities, the supreme god Ashur and the goddess Ishtar, the patroness of the city. Behind them are strange figures. One of them resembles a man with the body of a fish, the other a figure with raised arms, possibly a scorpion man. This is not a scene of submission, but of the assertion of power. The king is shown not as an ordinary ruler, but as a link between the world of people and gods. But the main thing is different. The relief was not destroyed. It was carefully buried, not thrown away, not broken, but hidden. This is done either to preserve it or to make sure no one else sees it. This happened after the fall of Assyria, probably in the Hellenistic period. And it's strange because these halls were known about back in the 19th century. The British took dozens of reliefs from there, but this one remained in place. Perhaps because no one knew where to look. Perhaps because it was intended that way. The relief itself was in the main part of the palace, right opposite the entrance, the most important place, the most visible. And then, silence for 2,000 years. Stone Age Axe. During excavations in the south of Denmark, in Rødbyhavn, archaeologists found something that is rarely seen in this form: a stone axe, completely preserved together with a wooden handle. The age of the find is about 5,500 years, and it is the condition that makes it unique. In the conditions of peat soil, saturated with moisture and organic matter, the wood did not decompose but seemed to be frozen in time. This is not an abstract archaeological object or a rare museum artifact. This is a real working tool that could be used for construction, hunting, everyday life. The slightly curved handle, the shape of the fastening, traces of wear, everything remained in place, and all this speaks not of a symbol but of a person who held this axe, carried it with him perhaps, passed it on by inheritance, and then it was lost or abandoned and lay in the ground for thousands of years. Such finds are important not only because they are rare, but because they allow us to feel antiquity not as an abstraction, but as a continuation. Between the one who held this axe and us, there is nothing but time. A continent underwater. At the bottom of the Strait of Madura near the island of Java, archaeologists have found something no one expected. Not a sunken ship, not artifacts, but an entire ecosystem. Layers of earth in which the remains of Homo erectus, fragments of skulls, and traces of life, about 140,000 years old, are preserved. Along with them are the bones of giant bulls, turtle shells, traces of bones broken to extract bone marrow. This is not just an ancient human site. This is a fragment of a submerged continent, a vanished world that once connected the islands to the mainland. Scientists call it Sundaland. Today it is underwater, but back then it was plains, something like an Asian savanna with rivers, forests, and herds of large animals. On the bones of animals, archaeologists found traces of processing, like that of mainland Homo erectus. But until now, it was believed that Javanese groups did not have such skills. Now it is clear there was contact between populations and cultural exchange too. People passed on to each other methods of hunting, disassembling carcasses, processing shells. This speaks not only of technology but also of memory, of the transfer of knowledge. In addition to traces of hunting, remains of mollusks and river sharks were found. Everything indicates that there was once a rich, living, complex landscape here where man was part of the ecosystem, and now all this is on the bottom. Sundaland sank underwater tens of thousands of years ago. Without noise, without traces of cities or temples, it simply disappeared. And if it were not for random finds on the seabed, we would not even know that it existed. This reminds us, huge chunks of history can disappear not from a catastrophe, but from time. And all that remains is a fragment of bone left in the silt. Neolithic Swiss knife. On the border of Germany and Switzerland in the Wangen-Hinterhorn area, archaeologists have found an unusual object, a Neolithic knife with a wooden handle. Length, 7.3 centimeters. Blade, flint. Handle, wood, secured with birch resin, and on the side, a hole for carrying. The whole design resembles something like an ancient multi-tool. And indeed, the find has already been called the first Swiss knife in history. The tool dates back to the Neolithic era, approximately 4,300 to 3,500 years BC. It was found at the site of the Finn culture, a society that lived near swamps and lakes in the territory of today's southern Germany and northern Switzerland. People here built pile houses, farmed, kept cattle, used copper products, and even knew how to use fabric. The knife from Wangan is simple, but it contains the whole essence of the time: convenience, reliability, versatility. This is not a ceremonial object, not a weapon, not an ornament. This is a tool that was used every day, and it is these types of finds that are important. Footprints in stone. In 1952 in Texas, in the Paluxy riverbed, workers were clearing the stone and came across a chain of clear prints. These were dinosaur footprints, large, elongated, in some places almost a meter long. There were many of them. It seemed that ancient lizards really walked along this place, one after another, leaving a path in the stone behind them. But nearby they noticed something strange: prints similar to human feet, long with the outlines of fingers. Some of them overlapped the dinosaur tracks. It was because of this that the place became a source of controversy. Some people saw a sensation in the find. Supposedly, this was proof that people and dinosaurs existed at the same time. Scientists were more cautious. Some explained the shape of the tracks by erosion, others, fakes. There are known cases when such human tracks were cut directly into limestone, then sold to tourists. There is still no exact version. But regardless of the controversy, the painting itself is the imprint of movement left 100 million years ago, and that is already amazing enough. Viking and the Cross. In the south of Sweden, near the city of Linköping, archaeologists were exploring an old quarry, an ordinary place where you would hardly expect discoveries, but on the top of the hill among the stones they came across a strange structure, a lonely burial. A circle of tightly packed stones, in the center, a stone coffin. It stood high, alone, overlooking the plain, as if the one lying inside had to look at something even after death. The coffin dates back to the 10th century, a time when Sweden was on the border of two worlds. Paganism was still strong, but Christianity was already penetrating life, and this burial is a reflection of this transition. Inside lay a man, with him an axe and a knife. Remnants of fabric, probably from ritual clothing. Everything suggests that he was from the top of society, perhaps a warrior, perhaps a representative of the nobility, but the way the coffin itself was arranged is no longer Scandinavian tradition. The stone cladding, orientation, location on the top of the hill, all this is already under the influence of Christian symbolism. Such hybrid burials are rare. Most are either completely pagan or already designed according to all the rules of the new religion. Here is a transition, a mixture of rituals. The last pagans still bury with weapons, but they already look at the cross, or at least recognize that times are changing. This man died on the border of eras. He no longer believed in Thor as they believed before him, but he did not accept Christ as his grandchildren's children will accept him. Stone cubes. Not far from Albuquerque, New Mexico, a group of tourists came to the edge of a canyon. At first glance, they are ordinary rock formations, but the longer you look, the more you get the feeling that something is wrong. The edges of the cliffs are perfectly straight. The edges are smooth, as if they were cut not by time, but by something sharp. In some places, the stone masses form clear cubes. Each weighs about 100 tons. There are no signs of processing, but there is no chaos of nature here either. Everything is too geometric. Comparisons immediately began online. Someone remembered the Bimini Road in the Bahamas, mysterious stone slabs going underwater. Someone, the megaliths of Baalbek. But still, the main reaction is the same. It looks wrong, too right to be natural, too unwieldy to be man-made. Scientists, of course, can explain a lot. Weathering, crystal geometry, pressure, faults. But visually, it is not convincing, because when you stand next to these forms, you do not get the feeling that nature did this. The question arises, if it is really artificial, then who did this and why? This is not the first and not the last place where nature seems to accidentally depict someone's work. But sometimes there is a suspicion that everything is the other way around, that it is not nature that imitates technology, but we who have not yet understood who was here before us. An imprint in the sea. There is a tiny island in the Adriatic Sea. Its area is only 0.14 square kilometers. It is uninhabited. There is no pier, buildings, or even paths. Only stones. But if you rise above it from the air, you will see something that is not visible from the ground. The entire island is penetrated by tens of kilometers of stone walls. They twist, intersect, form loops, circles, and lines. The entire structure resembles a giant fingerprint. The island is called Baljanak. Several centuries ago, farmers from the neighboring island of Caprige came here. They planted grapes, olive trees, and manually, stone by stone, built protective walls from the wind. Without cement, without technology, only the strength of their hands and patience. Even the numbers are impressive. On an island 1.5 kilometers long, 23 kilometers of walls, and on the entire Cybernic archipelago, more than 100 kilometers laid by hand. Today, these walls are protected by UNESCO as a monument to human labor, but no one lives in Balanak. The walls remain, and the people have left. A timeless sword. When archaeologists opened a flooded tomb in Hubei province in 1965, they found a sword inside that had been in the water for about 2,500 years. It lay in a wooden sheath, unpreserved, unprotected, but it looked like it had been made recently. The blade gleamed. The pattern was clear. It cut through paper like a blade. On the surface was an engraving with the owner's name, Gujian, King of Yue. This sword is not just a weapon. It was made with a precision that is difficult to explain. The alloy, the polish, the tightness of the sheath, everything was at the highest level. But the main thing is that it has survived centuries, wars, and complete oblivion and remained intact. Scientists are still not sure how this is possible, but the very fact that such an object has reached us in working order is already a discovery. This sword serves as a reminder that a thing can preserve history better than any words. Engineer from the future. In 1961, in the archives of the Romanian city of Sibiu, a professor was looking through old military records and accidentally came across a manuscript. Between the tables and calculations were strange diagrams. Not crossbows, not guns, but multi-stage rockets, stabilizers, nozzles, references to fuel. Everything looked like technical documentation from the 20th century, but the document was created in the 16th century. The author was Conrad Haas, an artillery master who served at the court in Transylvania. He ran the barracks, drew diagrams, wrote without embellishment and unnecessary words. His treatise was simply called How to Make a Good Rocket That Can Rise into the Sky on Its Own. Drawings, calculations, rare explanations, everything, as if he really tried to build something that did not exist at that time. Little is known about his life. He was born in 1509, was an engineer, did not participate in battles but created weapons. At the very end of the manuscript, he left a phrase unlike anything else. More peace and less war. Let the guns remain under the roof. Let there be no shot. Then the prince will save his money and the gunsmith his life. It's not a statement, just a quiet line at the bottom of the page. Merlin's parchment. Archives often look boring. Dusty folders, bills, names of long-forgotten people. And so it was in Suffolk County, in an old English estate, an ordinary 16th century ledger, and suddenly, under the leather binding, old French text with red and blue initials appears. The archivist stops. An investigation begins that will lead to the most mysterious legend of Britain, the story of Merlin and King Arthur. The parchment turned out to be a fragment of a 13th century manuscript, when legends about the Knights of the Round Table were at the peak of their popularity. Specifically, it is part of the Suite Vulgate du Merlin cycle, plots describing how Merlin acted after Arthur's coronation. Less than 40 such copies have survived, and each one is unique. But this one was sewn into the cover, like trash, because in the 16th century, old parchments were often used for bindings. The paper was expensive. Scientists could not touch the find. It was too fragile. Then technology came into play. Multispectral imaging revealed faded ink. X-rays created to study fossils allowed us to look inside the book. And it became clear, this is a new scene, previously unknown. 2 episodes. In the first, Gawain fights the pagan kings at Tameic. In the second, a blind harpist with a white dog appears during a feast. He charms everyone, asks permission to carry the standard in battle, and disappears. Then it becomes clear that it was Merlin who changed the course of events. Magic, a mask, a legend. But this is not the main thing. The main thing is that all this could have remained in the cover forever. The story written by monks 7 centuries ago survived dozens of generations, wars, oblivion, and surfaced only because one person noticed a strange pattern on old skin. A lock under the asphalt. During excavations in the center of Moscow in the area of Nikolskaya Street, archaeologists found a metal combination lock from the 17th century. 7 discs with Latin letters on the end, the initials MW. The lock was simple but neat. It is unknown who used it. Perhaps it was a travel chest, perhaps a personal box. Nearby, in the remains of a burnt building, bells made of non-ferrous metal were found. According to the time, the end of the 16th, beginning of the 17th century. They were most likely hidden before a raid or fire. This is what they do when they are not sure that they will be able to return. The bells were lying in a corner in the ground and were well preserved. In other areas, they found a Turkish dish, baking molds in the form of pine cones and flowers, tiles with ornaments. All these are everyday things. They belong to different people from different places and different eras, but they ended up in the same layer. Everything is within the boundaries of one city, under what we have long considered an ordinary street. A coin that looks like a medal. What you see here is not just money. This is a decadrachm, an ancient Greek coin worth 10 drachmas. It weighs about 43 grams. It is almost the size of a modern medal, and its meaning is also closer to a medal than to money. Such coins did not circulate in markets. They were minted for special occasions. Victory in war, a gift to the gods, a sign of remembrance. This one depicts the nymph Arethusa with a laurel wreath, earrings, and a thin chain around her neck. There are 4 dolphins around her. They seem to be moving in a circle, guarding her, or circling like waves off the coast. This coin was minted in Syracuse. It was here that the cult of Arethusa was especially strong. According to the myth, the nymph escaped from Alpheus and turned into an underground spring that bubbles up off the coast of Sicily. And next to it is the sea, dolphins, and the city that celebrated its victory through beauty. Decadrachms were rarely minted, usually as a special issue, and they were almost never used. They were given as gifts, kept, sometimes placed in graves. Only a few have survived to this day, and each of them is not just an artifact, it is a memory carved in silver, a reminder that money was once closer to a ritual than to a market. Craftsman's chest. In 1936, on the island of Gotland, a farmer lifted a plow and came across a wooden chest, chained and locked. There was no gold or weapons inside. There were tools, more than 200 of them. Hammers, drills, chisels, saws, scissors, forged locks and hinges. Everything was in working order without decoration, with obvious signs of use. Age, about 1,000 years. All of this belonged to a craftsman of the Viking age. And what is especially interesting is that the shape of most of the objects is almost no different from modern ones. Hammers with a convenient weight distribution, scissors with elastic handles, chisels, sharp, precise. Many of them could lie in a box of a modern carpenter and would not raise questions. The chest was found on the site of a former lake. Why it ended up there is unknown. It could have been hidden from robbers, or drowned while leaving in a hurry. Perhaps its owner simply did not have time to return. And then the place was forgotten, but the things remained. Metal was expensive in that era. Such a set was not just property, it was work, craft, accumulated knowledge. In this chest, not a legend, not a relic. Just life, collected in one box. Tameic gold. This tiara is over 2,000 years old. It was created in Egypt during the Ptolemaic dynasty, the period that began immediately after the death of Alexander the Great. Most likely it belonged to one of the noble women, a queen, priestess, or heiress at court. The decoration is made of thin sheet gold. On the sides are torches, a symbol of power and light. In the center is the Knot of Hercules, a well-known amulet of the Greco-Roman tradition. It was associated with protection, healing, luck, and childbirth. On the tiara, it is not an amulet but is part of the form, tied exactly along the line of the forehead. Golden tassels hang from the lower edge. Originally, there were 8 of them. 5 have survived. When the head moved, they swayed, reflecting the light. Inserts of carnelian, garnet, and pearls are visible only from a close distance. The decoration was created not for ostentatious effect, but as part of a personal image. Such things rarely reach our days, especially in almost complete form. Now the tiara is in the Getty Museum, where it is exhibited separately under spotlight. But even under the glass, it is clear that this is not just an object. It once lay on the head, and it belonged not to the era, but to a person. None of this changes history, but altogether it makes you look at it more closely. It's easy to miss these things, but if you stop, they stick in your mind for a long time. Thanks for watching this video to the end. Bye everyone.